Hello, today's video is a special project for me. This is a book I wrote called The Iron Furnaces of the Cove back in 2023. This is one of the very first books I've ever wrote, and I spent a lot of time researching the iron furnaces that were situated in the Morrisons Cove between 1809 and 1890. In this video, I'd like to share with you the history on this incredible topic in the Morrisons Cove area of Blair County. I hope you enjoy this video. Thank you. Writing a book wasn't as hard as I thought. It took some time, but just learning about history and discovering it and understanding it, putting it together, putting my facts in together and doing research and taking pictures, it was a lot easier than I expected. So it really came together after about 8 months to a year. Everything I researched, I decided to put into this book. So this book is a really easy read, and it's around 100 pages, lots of color pictures, and it really discusses the iron industry and the Cove. I'm really proud of it, and I hope you guys get a chance to get a copy. It's only $20 on lulu.com, and today I'll take you around and show you some of this history on video. Thank you. To understand the history of the iron industry, we have to first understand how we started in the iron industry, and that first ingredient needed in a blast furnace would be iron ore rock, and this can be found all around Blair County. Certain veins of rock in our earth had iron ore, and what ore rock is typically is any kind of rock that has minerals in it. It could be gold, silver, platinum, copper, galena, zinc, and this is iron ore. This is very common in Blair County, Huntington County, Center County, and iron ore was the main commodity needed during the iron industry. And what they did was that they would extract the liquid iron during the blasting process in an iron furnace. So this is the ingredient that they would need to get started. The second ingredient in an iron furnace would be limestone. Limestone is very common in Blair County, and that would be also put into the iron furnace, and it would be used as a flux. The limestone would smelt in with the iron ore at 2,500 to 3,000 degrees, and it would help pull the impurities out of the iron ore rock, and the impurities would be known as slag. So here's glass-like slag, and this is the waste product during the smelting process. And you can also find later on there's a lot of slag that looks like this when they switch to coke. But here's slag from an early iron furnace. Like I said, this is the waste product of during the smelting process. You'll find this all around the blast furnace site. Here's a picture of what an iron furnace would look like during the smelting days. Notice the main iron stack in the center. The iron stack would be built below a hillside with a bridge structure above for the men to load the iron ore, limestone, and charcoal inside the iron furnace. The men would load charcoal for their heat source. The charcoal was made by falling trees, 1 acre per day, and they made charcoal, and that would be the main heat source to heat the furnace. If you see the water wheel on the right, they would flow and direct water from a water source. The water would turn the water wheel, and it would create air power. The water wheel would make air power. The air power would blow in on the fire, keeping the fire at 2,500 to 3,000 degrees 7 days a week. And this would get the iron ore smelted, and the molten hot lava iron would flow out of the bottom of the furnace. The molten pit iron would flow out into metal castings on a bed of sand, and it would cool, turning into hot iron bars. And these iron bars or ingots would be taken to forges and foundries to turn into iron products. After the iron bars or ingots cooled down, they would be transported to a forge or a foundry. This is Cove Forge in the Morrisons Cove section of Blair County, and they would take the iron bars and heat them up, and they would make iron products. Anything from household products, cooking utensils, pots, pans, construction, nail spikes, beams, wrought iron, cultivators for plows, wagon wheels, anything and everything they needed iron for during this time would be built and made at these forges. A major part of the iron industry was cutting and falling the trees. A lot of men worked hard to cut trees. They would clear about an acre a day to run a blast furnace, and the logs would be hauled to a site where men would make charcoal. The charcoal was needed every day to blast these furnaces. It was an extensive part of the industry. The logs would be taken to spots to make charcoal pits. The charcoal pits were a series of logs stacked up in a teepee, and they would cover the teepee of wood with leaves and then dirt, as you see in this picture above. Once ready, these pits would be put on fire, and it would take up to 1 to 2 weeks to make a batch of charcoal. The men that would attend these charcoal pits 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, would be known as colliers. The colliers had the most skilled and the most hardworking and dangerous job of the iron furnace workers. The colliers were very respected and known to be some of the most skilled workers. They had to attend these pits every day, 7 days a week, and 2 men would typically watch up to a dozen pits at a time. I found this old newspaper from the Morrisons Cove Herald. This was printed in 1932, and right here shows like a map drawing of the cove, the cove area of Blair County, and you can see Roaring Spring, Orhill, Baker Summit, New Enterprise, Waterside, Lawrenceburg, Woodbury, Henrietta, Fredericksburg, Martinsburg, and Williamsburg. This is basically the map, and for the viewer that's not familiar with Morrisons Cove, it's basically a cove. We are stuck between mountains on all sides, so all around these towns we are trapped by mountains. For anyone that's unfamiliar with the cove, it's a geographic area encompassing a small section of southwestern Huntington, eastern Blair, and northeastern Bedford counties. The maps commonly identify the cove boundary as Tussey Mountain on the east, Dunning's Mountain along the south and southwest, and Lock Mountain and Canoe Mountain along the western side. Canoe and Tussey Mountains merge along the northern side at Water Street. The Juniata River passes through the northwestern side of the cove, entering through a mountain gap at Ganister and exiting through a Tussey Mountain gap at Water Street. At its widest points, the cove is approximately 9 miles east to west and 37 miles north to south. Today, the cove is well known for its farming and agricultural community. But at one time, before all that, was the heavy iron industry and a lot of industry that really made the cove a booming industrial site. So that's a little introduction to what the cove encompasses in Blair County here. Beautiful Morrisons Cove here. Driving down Clover Creek, and you notice all the beautiful farmland. Something that we pride ourselves out here in the cove is all this beautiful agricultural farming, and we got dairy, we got everything out here with the farming community. But believe it or not, when early settlers came here and came into Blair County in the Cove section, this would have all been woods. As you see up on the mountains around the Cove, this would all been trees, and all the men would cut and clear the trees an acre a day for the blast furnaces to heat the iron furnaces. So at one point this was all woods, and the iron industry deforested the Cove, but it turned into an advantage for amazing farmland, and over the years they cultivated and planted and farmed. So just a neat little piece of history here in the Cove, that a lot of this was cleared off by the iron masters and their teams for the iron furnaces. Okay, there was a total of 9 iron furnaces in the Cove. We are going to explore and review these furnaces in this video. The very first iron furnace that came to the cove was Mount Etna in Catherine Township. It operated from 1809 to 1872. Okay, we're on Etna Furnace, and this is in Catherine Township in Blair County, and I'm going to go up and show you where the Mount Etna Furnace is. Okay, so we're walking down here to the furnace. Mount Etna Furnace is right along Etna Furnace Road, and there she is. She's a beautiful furnace, and this was built in 1809 by a partnership formed, Messrs. Stewart, Cannon, and Moore. And if you look at it, you'll see this nice big retaining wall, and the brush and the vegetation is pretty well grown up here. But at one point, this was a large industrial site, and there would have been supporting structures all around the furnace. And they would load the iron ore, the limestone, and the charcoal on the top, and the iron ore would smelt down at 2,500 to 3,000 degrees to where it would make molten hot iron, and they would extract that iron and take to local forges and foundries. Now, this furnace was built in 1809, and it ran till 1872. Around 1820, Henry S. Spang would purchase this furnace, and he would run it till about 1851, and he would turn Mount Etna Furnace into a full iron making plantation. There would have been a full community of workers that lived in villages surrounding this area. They would have a grist mill, sawmill, they would have a forge, they would have houses for the workers. So early industrial blast furnaces like this would have had a community around it, and this would have kind of been a place where a lot of people would come to work and live, and that's why these are so significant in the community. Henry S. Spang would find lots of success around 1832 when the canal came right here to Williamsburg, and they would ship the iron ore, or the pig iron, on the Juniata Canal to Pittsburgh, where buyers in Pittsburgh would purchase their iron. Today you see this abandoned iron furnace, and at one time, you know, I can't imagine what it would have looked like during its operation between 1809 and 1872. It would have been very industrial, lots of buildings, and I can't imagine just coming in here with a horse and wagon and just seeing this massive blast furnace. And this was the very first iron furnace in Blair County, and it did about 50 tons of iron per week. All right, we'll go see some of the old structures around the village of Mount Etna. On Etna Furnace Road here, there's the old supply store, which looks like a beautiful home, but it was actually a store during its operation here. And here's an old tenant building where some of the workers would stay. And but this whole road goes through the village of Mount Etna. Okay, we're driving up to an original barn that was here on site, and this is a bank barn that was built into the embankment, and this is one of the original barns where they had some of their livestock and some of the, you know, stuff they needed for farming. But that's original building here at Mount Etna. Okay, we're at the rail trail here, and this is the Mount Etna station, and this is where the canal came through, and then later the railroad. But Henry S. Spang would load their pig iron up here at the canal, and we'll walk down there and I'll show you the canal bed, and they would ship it to Pittsburgh. Across the street is an old ironmaster's house. This is known to be the Samuel Islet house, and he would buy Mount Etna furnace when Henry S. Spang would die around 1851, 1852, and he would build this house here. This is his ironmaster's house, but this whole area across the road would have been old villages where the workers and the community would be around Mount Etna. Let's go check out this canal bed here. Okay, this is the former Petersburg Railroad that was built in, I believe, the 1870s. And this was the way to transport materials from east to west. Before that, we had the Juniata Canal which the Juniata Canal actually went right through this. You see this impression, but it would actually go along the former rail bed, and the Juniata River is over there. But this would have been the mode of transportation. They had canal boats that would move the materials from east to west to Pittsburgh. Okay, here's some of the original cabins that some of the iron workers and miners around Mount Etna would live in. But these are really old cabins, and there's only 3 here, but at the time there probably would have been, you know, a dozen or more. But that was the village of Mount Etna. And we're going to go ahead and head over to Canoe Furnace in Catherine Township, and we'll show you that one. Okay, we just turned off at 22 and we are on 866 heading towards Williamsburg, and we're right around this curve up here. We're gonna be pulling into Point View Homes, and that's where Canoe Furnace sits. So let's go take a look at that site. Okay, we're coming up from Point View Homes. This area is private property. I did get permission to come back here. I've met a few people that live up here that welcomed me several times, but we are walking down the pathway and former road to Canoe Furnace. This one's a pretty neat one. As we walk down to the furnace, we'll find lots of glass-like slag littering the property. This is the waste product from the smelting during the furnace. Lots of different colors, you know. And slag is really neat. It depends on the mixture of the iron ore and the charcoal and the heat, the temperatures that the waste would come out of the furnace, and it would cool and color different colors. So, but this whole area is just all along the site is just full of slag. So if you find a lot of slag around, you know you're at an industrial site. There she is. They do a pretty good job keeping the pathways and trails open up around and to come down to the furnace. But here she is. This was a circular style furnace, and the rock is beautiful. It's Ganister rock that came off the mountains right around this area. Ganister rock is a sandstone quartzite that is all around this area. Look at the beautiful stone, and you see the retaining wall around back, and there would have been structures all around the site. There's a map with this whole area. There would have been, you know, lots of buildings, lots of houses, and supporting structures to this iron furnace. And up top, there'd be a ramp across the top of the hillside, or a bridge structure where they would load the iron ore, the limestone, and the charcoal, and they would smelt it down 2,500 to 3,000 degrees. They would direct a raceway off the creek down here, and they would provide water power to turn a water wheel. The water wheel would blow in on the fire to keep the fire hot at all times, and that's where they got the hot temperatures they needed to extract the liquid iron out of these furnaces. Here we are. We're inside the former furnace. Now the whole front has fell over, and I'm standing on all the rock that fell out. And this was a circular style furnace. There's the bottom of the furnace. That's where the water wheel, I believe, came in, and there was a pipe, and the raceway's over here where the water wheel would have sat. Out front, there would have been a large building where the men would extract the iron from the furnace. This inside structure, there would have been a lot of bricks lining this furnace. They've been removed. That would keep the heat away from the rock. So, but yeah, sadly a lot of this fell down, but it's still here, which is a neat thing. This furnace operated from 1838 till 1848. It only operated for 10 years. It had the nickname Soap Fat Furnace. because the workers here ate fatty bacon and it tasted like soap fat, so it kind of got the nickname soap fat furnace. Henry S. Spang would build this furnace and put it into blast about 1838 as a second iron furnace location to run beside Mount Etna. Some iron masters tried to expand their operations and produce more iron. Short Mountain, which we're right beside, had the iron pits where they mined the iron ore, and they thought about expanding and making more money. And unfortunately, this furnace only operated for 10 years due to Henry S. Spang's declining health. And this creek over here didn't provide the best running water. And they needed a really good water source, fast running water to turn the water wheel. This creek throughout the year would struggle to create the water power needed to run the water wheel. I think that was one of the factors. Henry S. Spang's health was starting to decline. Around that time period, around the 1840s, there were some economic challenges, not a lot going on, and I believe they just decided to close this and concentrate all their focus on Mount Etna furnace. Samuel Islet in 1851 or 1852 would buy Mount Etna and Canoe furnace and all the land holdings off of the ironmaster, and he would take over the operation. Now, he never did anything with this furnace. He never put it back into blast, but all the property around here, he would utilize it for timber, iron ore rock, and limestone. A lot of the ironmasters back in those times had thousands of acres, and they used the resources for their operations. So Samuel Islet would buy this property, and later 1800s, above here, construction developers would purchase the property and turn this site into Point View Homes, a luxury home site overlooking the Juniata River. I'll share some pictures. Canoe furnace, 1838 to 1848. Here's our old map from 1890s. This is the Blair, Bedford, and Huntington counties geological map. And here's the cove. You can see how it's laid out here. And all the way down to the southern cove, it shows red marks for mines and ore banks. So the areas marked in red is where they were mining. Here's Orhill, a big, large area. Come over here to Henrietta. You can find a bunch of mining there. And here's Ormenia. And we head towards Williamsburg. Patterson Mines, Red Ore Bank. And then this is where we were today, right now, around Mount Etna. Etna Ore Banks is right off a short mountain. So these are the couple spots here where it's red. 1, 2, 3, even little 4 here. These were the iron mines around Short Mountain, and these mines would supply Canoe furnace and Mount Etna with their iron ore. And if you come over here to Etna furnace, you can also see another little pit here. So they would really get ore wherever they could find it. So they were looking for iron ore at all times to keep these iron furnaces going. So that's just a little bit about the locations of the iron mines. Okay, this is the Juniata furnace, also known as the Williamsburg furnace, located right in Williamsburg. John Neff, an early successful entrepreneur, would build the Juniata iron furnace. This is his house right off of Piney Creek coming into Williamsburg, the Spring House. This will be the location of former Juniata furnace right beside Martin's gas station. and sits along the Juniata River. Okay, we are at the Lower Trail Creamery in Williamsburg, and this is along the rail trail, rail trail, and this is the former site of the Juniata iron furnace. It sat right here, and it's called the Juniata furnace because it sat along the Juniata River, which is back there through the brush. And this furnace was also called Williamsburg furnace, and this was operated by John Neff. He's a very successful, smart businessman here in Williamsburg, and they would produce all their iron for the Altoona Railroad. This furnace operated from 1856 till about 1876, and it did for about 20 years, and it did very well here. And this site would run all the way down to Martin's gas station, but this is the former site of the Juniata iron furnace, and there are no ruins here at all anymore. But I'll come over here and show you the spring that would have ran the water wheel. Here is the spring that runs down from the spring house in Williamsburg. That was actually built by John Neff, and this water runs off the mountain and has so much water power that this spring would actually run the water wheel, which would create the air power to blow in on the fire of the furnace. So there would have been a water wheel somewhere right off to the side here, and the furnace would have been over here. And I'll show you a picture of the furnace here and that water wheel. But right here, the railroad came in right about the time when the furnace was closing. And the reason why you don't see a lot of slag or any waste from this furnace was they simply probably used it for fill and base for the railroad. And so there's not much. You can find slag along the river along here, indicating that there was an industrial site here. But this site is a former Juniata iron furnace, and the rail trail is a really nice place here to come ride your bike here in Williamsburg. So this place used to make pig iron for the Industrial Revolution and for the Altoona Railroad. And now this site offers ice cream. A lot of difference 150 years will make. Very good ice cream here. Do you like the ice cream, Nathaniel? Yeah. Awesome. This beautiful home is known as the Spring House here in Williamsburg. It's just coming in off of Piney Creek. And this was Iron Master home, John Neff. And he built Juniata Furnace, aka Williamsburg Furnace in Williamsburg. And what was neat is this amazing spring of water that he would channel this spring the whole way down to his iron furnace to use for water power to run the water wheel. So his crew would build these walls and everything. But this is the former spring house, John Neff's Iron Master home. The Iron Masters were known to build nice, large, beautiful homes to kind of compete with other Iron Masters. Those kind of became a tradition to kind of showcase their wealth. But this is a really beautiful home, still standing here. On the other side of the road here, the spring continues on and goes down through here, and that water would have been directed all the way down to the Juniata River where it feeds in. But John Neff would build an overhead raceway and direct that water to his water wheel to get air power for the iron furnace. So it's pretty good advantage for him right here. Beautiful property here for sure. In this picture, the middle left side of the picture, you'll see the above raceway going into the building with the water wheel. The Juniata furnace really helped Williamsburg grow, and during the Industrial Revolution, John Neff and his crew at Juniata furnace would have really helped the Altoona railroads grow by providing them their iron for Horseshoe Curve, the railroads, and the locomotives. John Neff would end up selling Juniata Iron Furnace, and he would move to Rome, Georgia, and take a job on for Rome Iron Works, where he would help them produce good quality iron down south. Okay, we are heading towards the village of Royer, and if you notice ahead, we're staring at Lock Mountain, and Lock Mountain is coming right across along Piney Creek here. This whole area was once owned by the Royer family. They would buy this large tract of ground off of Piney Creek and utilize its resources, the timber, the iron ore, and the limestone for their iron furnace. The Royer family was true masterclass in the iron industry. We're going to go check out their former Springfield furnace, and we're going to talk about the Royer family and learn about their history next. Okay, we're at one of the only historic sites in Blair County with the iron industry. This is the Royer Mansion, and this is a beautiful home that shows the history of the Royers. This is their mansion, and you can see this was the first part of their house here, and the second part of the house was added onto later, but this is the mansion that the Royers will live in, the Iron Masters, and their furnace is over on the other side of this area here. You'll see this term a lot. It's called Juniata iron. It's because around the Juniata rivers there was known to be lots of good quality iron ore, and this area was known to have some of the best, so they label this area Juniata iron. And like I said, we're at the beautiful Royer Mansion, and we'll go around back and take a look at it. Take a minute and enjoy some pictures of beautiful Royer Mansion and also Springfield Estates. Here's a really incredible book written by Ray Metz and Floyd Hohenstein back in 1951. This is about the Royer family, and got a lot of good information and learned a lot when researching the Royer family and the Springfield furnace. The Royer family started with Sebastian Royer. He would immigrate from France and have a son, Samuel Royer, and he would become captain in the Revolutionary War and would fight at the Cumberland County Militia. And Captain Samuel Royer would have two boys, Dan and John Royer. A very interesting story: during the Revolutionary War, Captain Samuel Royer's son, Daniel Royer, would join up at barely 15 to help fight in the Cumberland County Militia. While the Royers were fighting at Valley Forge, there became a food shortage, and the American troops were without food. It was very scarce. A heroic act, Captain Samuel Royer sent his son Daniel Royer to his home farm at Five Forks, and they herded their cattle all the way to Valley Forge. George Washington was so grateful for the heroic act that he would personally thank them by having dinner with Captain Samuel Royer and Daniel Royer. It was a heroic feat and a very proud moment for their family. After the Revolutionary War, Dan Royer would get into the justice of peace, and he would become an ironmaster in Lancaster County. Daniel Royer, after learning iron-making skills in Lancaster County, Daniel and John would decide to buy a large tract of ground off of Piney Creek here in the Morrisons Cove. They would come in 1810 and build their first forge, Cove Forge, and they would also build another forge called Franklin Forge at the present-day site of Ganister. They would set up these two forges so they could make their iron products to sell after they would complete their furnace at Springfield Furnace. In 1815, Daniel and John Royer would build the Springfield Furnace. This is an amazing original picture of what an actual iron furnace would look like during its operation. Notice all the supporting structures around the iron stack. Imagine seeing a site like this in the early 1800s. It would have been quite an industrial site. This is the present-day site of Springfield Furnace in ruins. The present-day site is along Royer, below Brumbaugh Transmission. Although it's still in ruins, it's nice that we still have this furnace in our area to remember the history of the incredible Royer family. If you visit this site, you'll find lots of slag and iron ore around the property, reminding us of the industrial blast furnaces. The Royer family owned their own iron ore mines, called the Springfield Mines. As what is known to be Ormenia today, between Clappertown and Williamsburg, is a large area of amazing quality veins of iron ore rock. Ormenia and the Springfield Mines would provide quality iron ore rock to Springfield Furnace. They had their own railroad that came through the area, delivering iron ore and clay to other different refractories and industries during that time frame. Back again looking at this old map, and right here is the Springfield ore banks. And if you notice up here, Springfield Furnace, and down here, Springfield ore banks. Today, this site is also known as Ormenia. Early on, they would mine iron ore rock, and they had amazing amounts of iron ore all along this area. And late early 1900s, the Woodbury Clay Company would start mining for clay, and general refractories would also be involved, and they would start mining clay in this area as well as iron ore at the same time for later industries, even after Springfield Furnace would close in 1885. Ormenia would continue in operation until about 1940. Okay, here in our book, so far we ran through Mount Etna Furnace, we went to Canoe Furnace, we seen Juniata Furnace, Springfield Furnace. Now we're going to head back towards Martinsburg more, and we're going to go to Rebecca Furnace. If you see, Rebecca Furnace operated from 1817 to 1882. And a lot of the industry in Martinsburg and Roaring Spring and McKee was heavily involved by Iron Master Peter Schoenberger, who was considered the Iron King. So we're going to do a little introduction about who the Iron King was and how important of a figure he was in the iron industry. Here is a young Peter Schoenberger, Iron King, as he was known here in Pennsylvania. Peter Schoenberger was born in 1782 and lived till 1854. Peter Schoenberger's father, George Schoenberger, was a German Hessian soldier who came here to fight against us in the Revolutionary War. After the Revolutionary War, a lot of German Hessian soldiers stayed in America to see the new opportunities that were here. George Schoenberger, who had roots in the iron industry in Germany, decided to start 2 iron furnaces here in Huntington County, which was the Union Furnace and the Huntington Furnace. While finding success, George would continue to operate his iron furnaces in Huntington County, and he would have a son named Peter. Peter Schoenberger would get his start in the medical field to become a doctor, and he quickly realized he wanted to follow his father's footsteps in the iron industry. Peter Schoenberger would take over his father George Schoenberger's operations at Union Furnace, close to Spruce Creek in Huntington County, and he would operate that. And also, he would operate Huntington Furnace in Huntington County, which was a very successful operation during its time. And then Peter Schoenberger would move from Huntington County, and he would set his eyes on the Cove for expansion. Peter Schoenberger, a true businessman, would put people in place to run his furnaces in Huntington County while expanding towards Morrisons Cove. Peter Schoenberger would enter Morrisons Cove right outside of Roaring Spring at an area called around Plum Creek. He would build the upper, middle, and lower Maria forges. That way, his iron furnaces that he built could have a place to make products. An iron master needed a forge because they would make the money when they made their iron products at the forges or foundries. It was a necessary part of the business. Here's Peter Schoenberger's very first iron furnace in the Cove. He would build Rebecca Furnace in 1817. His son-in-law, Edward Lytle, would run Rebecca Furnace for Peter Schoenberger. Let's go check out the site. Okay, we're leaving Martinsburg and heading towards Fredericksburg. And Martinsburg was founded around 1832. The closest iron furnace to Martinsburg would have been Rebecca Furnace in Fredericksburg. And Rebecca Furnace was built in 1817 by Peter Schoenberger. We're going to head out and check out that site right now. Okay, here we are. We're turning onto Rebecca Furnace Road in Houston Township. And we're going to drive down here where the furnace would have sat over here behind this barn. Okay, we're on Rebecca Furnace Road here, and you'll see this horse barn here. And the furnace sat over behind this fence here, down along the hillside in the field. That's the former site of Rebecca Furnace. And it's private property back there, so I'll show you some pictures of that site. Here's a picture of Rebecca Furnace partially removed, probably in the 1930s. This picture was from the Blair County Historical Society. Former history teacher Jack Kreider and one of the property owners at the site informed me this is the exact location of Rebecca Furnace. At the site, we found large pieces of iron ore. We found slag all around the site, indicating a blast furnace was here. This is the waste product of the smelting process. Beautiful green-like slag can be found everywhere. Even across the little creek, we found little piles of coke slag across the river from when it switched to coke. Rebecca Furnace would have been dismantled and the stones would have went elsewhere. I was always curious where these stones went. If you see the site today, it's just field and pasture for the cows. My curiosity was answered when I was at the Roaring Spring Library. I found out where the stones went. I was reading an old book in the Roaring Spring Library, and I found out the stones were purchased by a contractor and around the 20s, 30s, and used on a house foundation beside Subway in Martinsburg on Allegheny Street. And I went and got some pictures of the foundation rock. The owners are very surprised and happy about it. Also, some of the other stones from Rebecca Furnace were used at the Martinsburg Sportsman's Club at their fireplace. So it's nice that the stones could have another direction. Okay, this is the former site of Rebecca Furnace to the right, and the Iron Master's mansion is over there. We'll go check that out, but I wanted to show you this impression in the yard here, the field here. It's actually an old raceway dug along here, and you can see the entrenchment they would direct water all the way over to their water wheel. And I believe the raceway would go this way through the yard, and I believe either that way or somewhere off that way, they found a spring or some kind of water source, and they would run the water all the way through here to run the water wheel at the iron furnace, which was all the way down there. So these people are pretty smart. They did a lot of work to make this happen. So they needed a lot of good water power to blow air on the fire. So just a neat little observation out here. These are the fields around Rebecca Furnace, and this would all been cleared back in the day for charcoal. But notice Tussey Mountain, all through Tussey Mountain there's lots of charcoal pits where they were getting charcoal to heat the furnace. At one point that whole mountain would have been cleared off back in the 1800s when they were clear cutting it for charcoal. This beautiful property over here is called Oak Manor. This was Edward Lytle and Peter Schoenberger's daughter Elizabeth, and this was their Iron Master home. And if you notice some of the large trees, the large oak trees, the son-in-law, one of the son-in-law, Jack Kreider here, he told me that some of these trees have been around since the iron furnaces were here. So it's a beautiful property, and it's the former property owner, Edward Lytle, that, well, he ran it for his father-in-law, Peter Schoenberger, the Iron King. But this was their mansion. I'll show you a close-up of it. Okay, we're looking at the map again here. Here's Rebecca Furnace, and it sits right along Tussey Mountain. And at first, Rebecca Furnace, all the property around here this was all owned by Peter Schoenberger. He owned over 100,000 acres in Blair County. This is where they first started mining their iron ore rock at the Rebecca ore mines. This is at the very end of Claybank Road today. And then they would start mining iron ore rock over here in Millerstown at a site that's called Red Ore Bank or Millerstown Mines. Then they would eventually, towards the end of the career of Rebecca Furnace, they started mining iron ore rock at Henrietta. And they would use all three of these mines during the life from 1817 till 1882. Okay, we just finished Rebecca Furnace. We're going to skip down these two, and we're going to go to Elizabeth Furnace and Woodbury, which was the Bedford County area of the Cove. And this was built in 1829 and ran till 1845. And this was built by Iron King Peter Schoenberger. Let's go take a look at Elizabeth Furnace. Okay, we're out here in Woodbury, and we are behind the Barkman Oil Company. And out there along this hillside used to be the site of Elizabeth Furnace. This Elizabeth Furnace was built in 1829 by Peter Schoenberger, and it ran till 1844. And they hauled the iron ore rock all the way from Bloomfield mines at Orhill down through the barrens, and they'd bring it all the way here to the furnace. And like I said, the furnace sat somewhere along this hillside, and I walked this property before with a landowner, and you can find all sorts of green slag all over the property. And the reason why they shut this down in 1844 was Peter Schoenberger decided, let's move this furnace closer to Orhill so they didn't have to ship iron ore rock out this far. So this is the former site of Elizabeth Furnace, and built by Peter Schoenberger, 1829, and ran till 1844. They dismantled it, took it down, and they would rebuild it at Bloomfield right below Orhill, and we'll go check that out next. Okay, so we talked about Elizabeth Furnace. Now we are going to talk about Bloomfield Furnace. And this is also in Bedford County, and this would operate from 1845 to 1888. And to clarify, Peter Schoenberger would tear down Elizabeth Furnace and rebuild it at Bloomfield. And the reason why is because Orhill provided all the iron ore rock to Elizabeth Furnace, and they wanted to make the furnace closer to Orhill, so they rebuilt right below Orhill at Bloomfield. So we'll explore that one next. Okay, we're at the Bloomfield Nursery, and across the street, this is Sproul Mountain Road that goes over Sproul. This across the street was former site of Bloomfield Furnace, and I believe Bloomfield Furnace sat right along that hill over there. And this furnace operated from 1845 till 1888, and they tore the Elizabeth Furnace out in Woodbury, dismantled it, and they built it here at Bloomfield. Orhill is up on the hill up there, and they would bring the iron ore rock down closer, so it's very convenient. And like I said, I think the furnace sat right on this hillside, because this is what where I think it sat. So not 100% sure, or it might sat against that ridge, but there's large slag piles back there in the woods from the Bloomfield furnace. Okay, we're back here at the map, and we're going to look at the iron ore that they mined for Elizabeth Furnace and Bloomfield. And here is the Bloomfield mines. Notice how large this area is. Bloomfield mines at Orhill had the best iron ore rock in the nation at the time. If you see how large that area is, there was so much iron ore in that area, and that's why they named this area Orhill. But if you look at all the other red spots in the cove, this one is just massive. And this would provide Elizabeth Furnace with iron ore, then Bloomfield Nursery, and it will also provide Martha Furnace, Rodman, and they also put a lot of this iron ore on the railroad, sold it to other furnaces. Bloomfield Mines was contracted with the government for iron for military weapons and cannons, and so they were contracted with Peter Schoenberger, and this is an area that Peter Schoenberger would strike it rich. To let the viewers know, if you go on my YouTube page and go to videos, I have 2 videos on Orhill and the Bloomfield mines. There's a part 1 and a part 2. I recommend checking that out, and you can see at the site of the ore pits, and we actually go in there and explore, and it will show you how large that area was. It's a really interesting video. Okay, we're almost finished up with the iron furnaces of the Cove. We're going to talk about a shift in the industry. New techniques were used, and more modern advances in the industry came to light. We're going to discuss Martha Furnace and Rodman 1 and Rodman 2, Martha and McKee Gap, Rodman 1 and 2 in Taylor Township. They're right around the bend from each other in McKee Gap. Martha Furnace operated from 1838 to 1890, the longest iron furnace that lasted in the Cove. And Rodman 1 and Rodman 2 would operate from 1862 to 1873. Let's go check out those sites. Okay, here's Martha Furnace and McKee Gap, and we're going to talk about some changes in the industry. Notice the railroad that goes straight to the furnace. Notice the tall white stack in the back. That's a hot blast system. There's no more need for running water. They would recycle the hot steam off the fire to create air power. With the new hot blast system, there was no need for running water, so they could build these iron sites anywhere that was good for transportations, like directly along the railroad. They also started using coke to heat the furnaces. What you see here are coke ovens at Bennington, and they were beehive-shaped brick-lined ovens, and they would produce coke. Here's some coke ovens at Glen White above Horseshoe Curve. They would put coal inside these ovens and burn it down at 1,000 to 2,000 degrees to make a product pictured here called coke. The coke would be a new, efficient way to heat the blast furnaces, and they wouldn't have to cut and clear thousands of acres of timber. It was so efficient and a new way to do it. Here's an amazing painting done by Emerald Zockel on the Frankstown furnace. If you notice, right in front of the furnace stack, there's a steel or iron mechanical system. This was a hot blast system. Recycling the steam off the hot fire could create new steam power, which should create air power to blow into the fire. No more water was needed. Martin Bell helped create the hot blast system. They operated the Elizabeth Sabbath Rest Furnace in Pinecroft. The Bell family were very innovative, and Martin Bell would help create the hot blast system, a game changer in the iron industry, making things more efficient, and you could build these sites anywhere. Okay, let's go check out the former site of Martha Furnace and McKee Gap. Okay, we're in McKee Gap. Right here's the big gap that goes into the cove, and this is the former site of Martha Furnace. If you notice the Dunning's Mountain right here, the Martha Furnace sat back in here, and this presently is the site of PennDOT, and this is actually private property. Now, I did get permission to come back in here, so we'll walk back in against the woods and see if we can find anything. Okay, we're right along the Everett Railroad, and I know they're not running trains here today, so I'm gonna walk up here real quick. But right along the railroad, you can see slag from the iron furnace. And what made this site so well is it was right along a great transportation route to put the pig iron directly on the railroad. Okay, and right up there is a nice big flat spot and some hillsides up top. You can clearly see that's exactly where the iron furnace sat. I'll just take a quick little walk up there real quick and see if I can see something. I know I'm in the right spot because here's some glass-like slag. Something about Martha Furnace that we need to know is it was built in 1838 by Peter Schoenberger, and at first it was a charcoal blast iron furnace. So the slag was always glass-like when they were dealing with charcoal. When they switched to coke, it would make the slag would appear darker and different colors. So this furnace started in 1838. It'd be rebuilt, 2 times, and eventually have the new hot blast and coke powered iron furnace. Let's take a look up there. Okay, clearly there's a flat spot up here. Not large enough for the furnace, but I know there's some excavations along this hillside. It might even be over there where the actual furnace sat. This is really cool. Some kind of tipple or something came across this railroad. Looks like an old bridge or something. Here's some nice coke slag. Okay, I see a large flat spot up there. I'm going to say that's where Martha Furnace sat. That's definitely a larger flat area here. So the furnace probably sat up there on that flat spot, or could have sat over here a little bit more, but this is without a doubt the location of Martha Furnace. And this was a very industrial site, did very well against the railroad here. And this railroad would continue around McKee Gap, come into Taylor Township, right to the other furnace, Rodman, which was another large industrial iron furnace. And we'll look around here a little bit more, and then we'll head over there. In the picture of Martha Furnace, it's right at this bend here in the railroad, and it appears to be sitting right at this bend, which I see a large flat spot up there. So there again, that might have been a spot where the furnace sat. It could have sat about anywhere right along this hillside here. Okay, this is definitely the site of Martha Furnace. In the picture, it sits right before this curve and bend of the railroad. There's flat spots up there, and there's some excavations over here where you know, structures would have sat right along the railroad. But I'm not going to go up there. I don't have pants. I have shorts on, and I'm not really dressed to go explore there. It could be snakes and poison ivy and stuff. So I'll come back in the fall, take a look at all that. But you can clearly see the flat spots up there where the structures would have sat for Martha Furnace. So pretty cool. Okay, we're at Terrascape Supply in McKee Gap. It's a wonderful landscape center that everybody knows about here in Blair County, and great place to get landscaping products. And out back here, this site was formerly owned by Peter Schoenberger. This was all Martha Furnace property, and just wanted to show you their slag dump. And their slag dump from Martha Furnace is back here. Okay, this is all coke slag from Martha Furnace, and it's not the typical glass-like slag that you would see from earlier charcoal blast iron furnaces. This is slag would change appearances when they would switch to hot blast and coke. It would be more, it looks more like limestone and like dirty concrete. And what they would do is, so you can see how big this pile is here, they would have a dinky track or a separate little rail system that would come over from the furnace with a hot iron made rail car, and it would be full of, they would extract the liquid slag, and it would be molten hot, and they would bring it over by rail car and just dump it. And it would dump hot, and it would just kind of over time it would cool and harden, and that's why it looks like a big ledge of limestone, but it's actually slag. And here's some slag, and it's everywhere here. So it's a large pile of slag. So this is the slag dump, and over time people have used it for road base and stuff like that. But this pile goes the whole way over the hill. I actually have a picture of this, you know, back in the early 1900s, and I can put it in the video here. But this is the Martha Furnace slag dump right behind Terrascape Supply. Notice the McKee Gap here with the slag pile in the front. That's all the waste product from Martha Furnace. Pretty awesome picture. Check out the trestle that goes across McKee Gap. That was early 1900s. That was taking stone off the quarry behind Yurdes. Along McKee Gap Road is this old building here. You can see the original stone up top. The lower part was added on, but this was Peter Schoenberger's supply store. Not supply store, but it was a supply building where they would house supplies needed for Martha Furnace. It's been confused over the years that this was a store for the workers or a general store, but this was actually just a supply store for supplies they needed at Martha Furnace, which sat right behind here. At one point, this supply building was used by Jacob Higgins and the Cove Minutemen to defend McKee Gap. So at one point during the Civil War, they would use this as a headquarters for Jacob Higgins and his men to defend the gap if the South and the Confederates came through the gap towards Altoona. But there again, this was built for a supply building for the Martha Furnace. Alright, so we left the site of Martha. Now we're going to go back through McKee Gap into Taylor Township, and we're going to check out the Rodman site, which is right around the bend here, heading into Taylor Township. Here's Rodman Furnace in Taylor Township. The site today is directly across New Enterprise Stone and Lime. Today we would basically be driving right in front of these furnaces, and the hillside is right behind the furnace. You can see there's two stacks, Rodman 1 and Rodman 2. These furnaces produce 300 tons of pig iron per week, making it the highest producing iron furnace works in the Cove. This furnace was named after Lieutenant Rodman, who was a Civil War lieutenant that developed military weapons. The Rodman gun was a military marvel at the time and was used along naval bases for, you know, enemies coming in off the ocean. The gun was never used in battle. Lieutenant Rodman only wanted iron ore from Orhill, so they would build a Rodman furnace close by in Taylor Township. Rodman claimed that the iron ore from Orhill was so good that his guns would fire better from it. Okay, we're sitting here at New Enterprise, Stone and Lime in Rogue Spring, and across here would have been Rodman Furnace. You notice Dunning's Mountain right here, but this is where Rodman Furnace would have sat. There was 2 iron furnaces here, Rodman 1 and Rodman 2, and they would make high quality pig iron and send it to Pittsburgh to make the Rodman cannon. And this was a really large naval cannon they were designing during the Civil War. But yeah, Rodman would sit along this road, and this was all cleared out back then, and I'll show you a picture of what it looked like during its time. Okay, I hope everyone enjoyed the video. I know it's pretty long, but I tried to be very, very informative of the entire industry here in the Cove, and by now maybe some of you realize how incredible it actually was. This played a big part in our history here in Blair County, and when the iron industry stopped, everything switched to steel. So the iron furnaces were no longer needed here in Blair County, and a lot of the industry switched to the Bessemer system, where they would take iron ore and they would turn it into steel a lot stronger. And steel furnaces would be in Johnstown, Pittsburgh, and other larger cities, required no more need for iron furnaces in the Cove and Blair County. But we sure helped pave the way for the Industrial Revolution. If you like this book and you're interested in a copy, they're available at lulu.com. Just type in iron furnaces of the Cove, or you can get it locally at Gartland Supply in Martinsburg. And I really hope you enjoyed the history on this book. On another note here, I followed up the iron furnaces of the Cove with the rest of the iron furnaces in Blair County. That one's called Blair County Iron. It talks about the remaining 9 iron furnaces on the other side of Blair County. And after the iron industry was done, my third book was Blair County Limestone and Ganister. This talks about how Blair County would continue to aid in the Industrial Revolution here in Blair County to help the steel industry. It's a real incredible book on how we would continue to help the steel industry, and we'll talk about that video at another time. Have a great time. Thanks for watching.